how do you see the current phase of the conflict in the Middle East?
Um, Karl von Clausewitz wrote a book called On War. He's a Prussian strategist from the Napoleonic era, but many of his maxims are timeless, including the one that basically goes, war is an extension of politics by other means. In short, if you're a geopolitical analyst and you're looking at purely military affairs on the battlefield, you're missing the bigger picture. It's all about politics. I mean, Netanyahu might be able to say that, we have won more tactical engagements in Gaza than Hamas has. They might be able to say that they've won a series of tactical engagements against Hezbollah. They can't say that about Iran yet, but they're going to try. Maybe if they attack the Houthi, they can say, we've launched successful military strikes against, the Houthi ports and things of that nature. But the day after each one of these tactical victories, you have to ask yourself, is Israel winning? And the answer is no. They haven't won militarily. Stringing together a series of tactical victories does not a strategic victory make. I mean, America learned that lesson in Vietnam, where very rarely did we suffer a tactical defeat. Almost every engagement we had with the enemy resulted in the Americans controlling the battle space afterwards. But that wasn't what it was about. It wasn't about, holding Hill 861 or, clearing, Valley X. It was about defeating the enemy. And we never defeated the Viet Cong, and we never defeated the North Vietnamese, and therefore we lost the Vietnamese War. Why? Not because of the military per se, but because of the political aspects of it. The American people basically lost the will to continue the fight. We exhausted ourselves, and so we left, and the Vietnamese won. Israel has said that its definition of victory with Hamas is the physical destruction of Hamas as a military organization or terrorist organization, to use the Israeli terms, and its elimination as a politically viable entity. This is not the case. Hamas is very much alive and well and living and fighting the Israelis. The Israelis don't control Gaza. I think they've learned the hard lesson that simply parking yourself on the top doesn't mean you control what's underneath. And, the Hamas is, inflicting a death by 1,000 cuts on the Israelis. Hamas politically is more viable today than it has been ever in its existence. It's done more to create the circumstances for the existence of a Palestinian state than any other Palestinian or entity or Palestinian ally. So Israel, it's clear Israel has lost the war. If we were judged today, they've lost because they haven't achieved their political objectives, and Hamas is achieving its political objectives. You can't discern victory simply by looking at the battlefield. The same thing with Hezbollah. Israel now has said that it seeks the physical removal of Hezbollah from south of the Litani River, and they seek to destroy Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. One of the metrics used, in addition to seizing territory in southern Lebanon, is to create the conditions conducive to the return of 60,000 Israeli settlers who reside in the north who have been evacuated. In order to do that, you have to eliminate Hezbollah's ability to fire rockets into northern Israel. Israel somehow believes that occupying Lebanon up to the Litani River would somehow achieve that objective without acknowledging that technology has changed, that that Hezbollah possesses the ability to strike Israel from locations that are north of the Litani River. So, but even then, let's take a look at what they've done. They haven't succeeded in the south. They're bogged down. They're fighting on terrain that Hezbollah's had 18 years to prepare for this fight. There's not a valley, a village, a street, a hilltop, a nook, a cranny in that battle space that Hezbollah hasn't walked over and assessed how we can get a mortar shell to land here. Where does the mortar have to be? What coordinates do we have to put into the mortar? What's it, what elevation, etc. They've test fired everything so that when the Israelis come running up the hill and they go, take cover here, they're in a place, and the Lebanese go, well, that's pre-targeted zone, Alpha Alpha 012, fire, boom, bam, death. This is what Israel's moving into. And they tried it in 2006. They failed, and I anticipate that they will fail again. Iran, Israel's never had to deal with an Iran that was capable of striking it decisively. And there's nothing Israel can do to stop it. The missile defense shield doesn't work. This is a reality. And if they want to extend it, Israel's going to find that there is a soft underbelly, that the next targets won't be, hardened aircraft shelters on a military base, but rather, soft, water purification plants, energy production plants, power plants, distribution plants, other critical infrastructure. And then that's the end of Israel as a modern nation state. When Israel loses the ability to generate electricity, there is no electricity in Israel. When Israel loses the ability to pump fresh water into the households, there is no fresh water. There is no sewage. Israel ceases to function as a modern nation state. How is this victory? Israel is weaker today than it has ever been at any time in its life. The Houthi have shut down, effectively embargoed Israel's second largest port, Eilat, in the south. Haifa is under attack now. So that port facility is no longer. Insurance companies are going to be like, well, we can't insure you going into Haifa anymore because there's rockets coming down, and we can't afford to pay the premiums. Israel, $67 billion economic hit over the course of the last year, and it's going to get worse. On September 9th, 2003, Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech about an initiative that Joe Biden had put forward at the G20 summit in New Delhi, the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor. He said, this will change the face of the Middle East and Israel forever. This is the greatest single event in Israel's history. These are his quotes. Well, the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor isn't going to happen ever because of Israel. What Netanyahu is ignoring, the reason why France and other nations are turning their back on this, Israel has exposed to the world its reality. It's a brutal apartheid genocidal regime. That's it. The Israeli people have exposed themselves as people who support and sustain a apartheid regime that commits genocide. And the world is disgusted by this. Even a world that is accustomed to the slaughter of Arabs. I mean, let's just be clear about it. The world doesn't blink when Arabs die. Hell, if we blinked when Arabs died, we would blink a long time ago. The number of 40,000 dead Palestinian civilians is low. I mean, there's people now saying, nah, man, when you get under that rubble and you take a look at Gaza and tell me today, that ain't 40,000. When you start removing the rubble and you find the bodies, you'll find that maybe 180,000 people have been killed. Maybe more. We don't know. But look what Israel's done. And nobody's saying anything. I mean, I did a little demonstration here, but, really, I think we just gave up a long time ago caring about Arabs. We didn't care about 500,000 Iraqi children back in the 1990s when Madeleine Albright said it was a price we were willing to pay to overthrow Saddam Hussein, to starve to death, allow them to lie lingering deaths of disease, dysentery, because we would deny them the medicines they needed to cure these simple things. 500,000 Iraqi babies sure didn't sway America. We didn't lose any sleep. Oh, that's too bad. That's just a number. 180,000 dead Palestinians, just a number. We don't attach faces to them. We don't say they're people. It's just a number. It's a statistic. They're Arabs. They die all the time anyways. And again, how can we care about the Palestinian people more than the Egyptians? How can we care about the Palestinian people more than the Saudis, more than the Kuwaitis, more than the Jordanians? The Arabs don't care about the Palestinian people. Why should we care about the Palestinian people? We should care about the Arabs that kowtow to us, that subordinate their national interests to us, to give us the oil, to give us access to military bases, to do what we want them to do. Why should we care about the Palestinian people? And we don't care about the Palestinian people. What we care about is our own reputations. And when the world starts to wake up to the reality that what is happening with the Palestinians is genocide, then leaders like Emmanuel Macron start to understand, well, we have to say something, we have to do something. It appears. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. BRICS. BRICS is why. BRICS is creating a gravitational center, a new gravitational reality in the global geopolitical community that is more than just economics. It's achieved a political status, and the political status has to take into account now how the world feels about Israel. And the global South is rejecting what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people. And they're creating a new moral standard. America used to say, we're the moral standard. We're the moral center of the world. We're democracy. Joe Biden, in his 2022 national security strategy statement, democracy is how we define ourselves to the world. The world will rally to us because of our, the democracy we bring, the shining city on the hill. It's all been shown to be a lie. We're not a shining city. We're a ghetto. We're not a democracy. We're an autocracy. And when it comes to the rest of the world, we're a dictatorship. We dictate, you do, or we bomb you or sanction you. That's how America interfaces with the world. It's not democracy. We don't care what you think. We don't care anything about you. We don't even like you. And then suddenly we're surprised when the world says, well, we don't support this American hegemony anymore. We think you suck. So we're going to gravitate over here to BRICS. And that gravitational pull is now causing problems for America's allies in Europe and around the world, who are saying, wait a minute, not so fast. We actually believe in preventing genocide. So Macron came out with his statement. But what did he do as soon as Netanyahu came on and gave his little, whiny talk? Macron folded. They're selling them weapons. They'll never stop selling them weapons because they don't care about Arabs. I'm just going to say it one more time. And it's not just Arabs. We don't care about Persians. We don't care about anybody from that part of the world. You're foreign to us, especially Muslims. What was the last time, and I say this to an American audience, but I'll say it to a European audience too. When was the last time Christians from the United States or Europe voluntarily just got up and went to the local mosque, knocked on the door and said, hey, is the imam in? I'd like to talk about your congregation, you as a community, how you guys are doing. Is there anything we can do to help you? Or you could run into problems. Welcome to the community. You've been here for how long? 40 years, and we never noticed you because you're Muslim. But how many people have reached out and just tried to understand, reach across and say, hey, we got a thing going on at our church here next week. Why don't you guys come over and afterwards, and we'll have a little picnic together and just get to know one another. We believe in the same God. So let's talk about, reach out to the Jewish synagogue and get everybody together and say, hey, what's up? Yahweh is great. Allah is great. It's the same thing, same person. According to the books, God is God. We don't do that because we're somehow, while we've conditioned ourselves to accept the Jews because it's part of the Judeo-Christian ethic we like to talk about, we condemn the Muslims. They're different. It's racism. It's chauvinism of the worst, national chauvinism of the worst sort. But that's the reality. We in the West, primarily white people, don't care about brown people, Muslims in the Middle East. You know who does? The brown and yellow people around the world, the black people in Africa, because they're all used to the racism coming from the great white hope, the great white Bwana, the white guy who colonized them and continues to believe that they serve as colonies. They're used to that. And so they work together because they've been oppressed by the same enemy. They work together just fine. They get along with each other just fine. They don't think of people as black, brown, yellow. I guess they do. There's racism everywhere. But they do work together much better than we do because it's based upon equality, consensus driven, as opposed to, the great white hope out of Washington, D.C. dictating solutions. Because even when we had a black president, we were still the great white hope.
Do we know that if the Biden administration was successful in avoiding the conflict, the escalations between Iran and Israel?
I mean, we'll find out. I don't know. I think, Netanyahu's boxed himself into a corner and he's going to have to do something. I think the most recent statement is that he's going to strike primarily military industrial, and military production sites, not understanding that when the Iranians said, "You bomb us, we're taking out your infrastructure." Literally, it's a loaded gun up against the Israelis' head. Doesn't matter. If you bomb nuclear sites, if you bomb oil, that'll get you one kind of retaliation. It'll be more regional in nature, existential. But if you just attack Iran already said you can't attack us. It's not like we're going to give you permission to attack us. If you attack us, we're taking out your infrastructure. We'll take out your power plants, water desalination, distribution, energy production. We'll take it out. Now, whether Iran does that or not, I don't know. But hey, they fired 200 missiles into Israel the other day, showed they can do it. They're not afraid of it. They'll do it again. This time, I think they'll come in with more missiles, better missiles. And I mean, this time they fired a whole bunch. The Iranians are smarter than the average dog. And I don't mean that. That was just an American saying. I'm not calling anybody dogs. They're smarter than the average person. They fired a whole bunch of older liquid missiles. I'd like to wish I could talk to the Israelis about what their intercept points are for their various systems, because what happens with a liquid system is that it fires, and then at some point in time it runs out of fuel, or you can do a cutoff, and so it stops the propulsion. And then the Iranian missiles, they separate the warhead. So now you're the Israelis and you got your radar and you're tracking this singularity in, and then it separates. Now you have two targets, and that complicates things, because now, are you going to target the big one? Are you going to target the little one? How do you reorient to the little one? A lot of problems, especially when you have 200 coming at the time and you get the separation. And then the warheads that separate, they maneuver, they accelerate, they deploy decoys. These were all the older missiles that the Iranians fired, and most of them hit their targets, which means that they, I think, have designed their warhead separation moment to be at the prime intercept moment, meaning that they are deliberately, just through the mere operation of the system, confusing and nullifying the Israeli missile defense system. But the important thing is they did that with their older systems. I think they fired a handful of their new weapons to hit some critical targets. But the next time around, not only will they be firing these systems, but they'll be firing even more of their advanced systems. And they've already shown that Israel and the United States can't defend against this. Yeah, you'll get one or two, but lucky hits. But initially they said that they shot down 90%, and I think I went, well, wait a minute. Now if they only fired 200, let's go maximum number 200, 180 to 200. 10% of 200 is 20. That means there are only 20 impacts, but I can count 32 at Nevatim alone. You're lying. You're lying. You're not telling the truth. And then there's another 32 at the other airfield. Oh my God, that's 64. And then there's another 32. Now we're getting close to 50% already got through. And we already done the full calculation. You're lying. I mean, that's the reality. The Israelis and the Americans lied. The Iranians successfully attacked the targets they wanted to attack, achieving the results they wanted to achieve, which wasn't death and destruction, but sending a signal that the next time we do this and we put 32 missiles, warheads on a target, it's not going to be an airfield per se. It's going to be your power plant. And there's no hardened aircraft shelters at a power plant. When it hits, the whole plant disappears. And then we'll do 32 more at this power plant. You only have 5 power plants in Israel. We'll take them all out. How do you generate electricity at that point in time? You don't. And then what happens when we hit all of your desalination plants? You can't generate fresh water anymore. What happens when we blow up your gas production, your oil production, your energy? Suddenly Israel doesn't exist anymore. And Iran can do that right now. Right now, lights out. Well, that's the reality of the situation we're in, and the Israelis know it. So I think, if the Israelis want to carry out that attack, there has to be some calculus going on that I'm not aware of. And I don't think that calculus includes America joining them in attacking Iran. Why? Because all that death and destruction I just talked about can be put on every single American base in the region, and we don't have the missile defense to protect it. We got a handful of Patriot batteries. We got a couple Aegis ships. The ships will be sunk. The Patriot batteries will be destroyed, and Al Udeid Air Base will cease to exist. Every aircraft we have on there will be gone. And any base we go off to, whether one in Kuwait or if we flee to Saudi Arabia, we'll take those out. Iran will take those out too. And then they'll, we've got a couple thousand Americans in Iraq and Syria that are literally living hostages. At any time, the popular militias want, they can overrun these facilities. That, by overrun, I mean they come over the wall, they come through, and they kill, capture everybody inside. And the battle will be over that quick. There's nothing that can be done to save these Americans. They're literally living hostages. And what American president wants to turn to the American people and say, well, last night, to appease the genocidal, maniacal regime in Tel Aviv, I authorized American forces to participate in a futile effort to shut down Iran's military capabilities. As a result, we've lost 10,000 dead. Blame me. In an election year, on the eve of national elections, that's not a conversation the president wants to have with the American people. So I don't know what's going on with the Israelis, but I would say this, that it's my assessment that if they attack Iran, they commit suicide, and they know that. So maybe they're not going to attack Iran. They're going to try and bluff this attack to get the most concessions they possibly can out of the Biden administration.
Is Iran getting prepared to respond to Israel if they attack them with nuclear weapons?
If Israel attacks Iran with nuclear weapons?
Because we've heard, it seems that there are some rumors that Iran has tested a nuclear bomb.
The problem with that test, there's two major problems with that test. One is the diversion of nuclear material away from the International Atomic Energy Agency's ongoing monitoring regime. Yes, the Iranians have blocked IAEA inspectors from looking at centrifuge production and other things that were never part of safeguards, always part of the expanded inspection regime under the JCPOA, but the Iran nuclear deal. But the actual safeguards agreement is designed to account for the totality of nuclear material in Iran. And that safeguards agreement is still there, still in place. Inspectors are still going in, and there's been no talk about the diversion. And remember, this wouldn't be insignificant diversion. This would be a massive diversion of a particular, component. This is the 60% enriched UF6, uranium hexafluoride, that Iran has produced, ostensibly to support the production of metal fuel plates for a research reactor in Tehran. But there's more, they have more there than that. The IAEA has assessed that Iran could produce up to 3 nuclear weapons, I think by now up to 5 nuclear weapons using this material, but it would have to be diverted. So there's been no talk about massive diversions. And unless Iran had a totally secret, uranium enrichment program, which is highly unlikely because of, again, the fact that the JCPOA was pretty comprehensive in tracking this kind of stuff. And even, since they've done that, you'd have to divert material. There'd have to be a whole new source of uranium dioxide and, the yellow cake and all these things. So without diversion, you don't make the bomb. So where'd the bomb come from? The other thing is the earthquake in question was 10 miles below the surface. The deepest oil well is like 7.7 miles. The idea that the Iranians are going to drill a borehole down 10 miles and put, a device down there with all the testing mechanisms and everything, and then without being detected, no. So I think that was an earthquake. Now I know there's going to be people come out and talk about the seismic wave, and there was no, compression wave in the fore and all that stuff. I mean, that's how can I debate that? I'm just saying that 10 miles below the surface, unprecedented, unlikely, And the lack of diversion makes me say that whatever happened, my money is that it wasn't an Iranian nuclear test. But back in May, the former foreign minister of Iran, currently a member of the Expediency Disarmament Council, which is a constitutionally mandated body that advises the supreme leader on a variety of issues, said, if Israel ever attacks our nuclear infrastructure, we will have to make adjustments to our nuclear posture. The implication was that Iran would make a nuclear bomb in response. Since then, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, or a senior member of the Revolutionary Guard, came out and said that the current policy continues to be no nuclear weapon, but we are prepared for a time when realities change and people threaten the existence of the Islamic Republic. And if that happens, we would obviously change what we're doing. I don't think the Iranians make these statements in a vacuum. I think these statements are made about the time that the former foreign minister made his statement. There was talk about Iran procuring specific components usable in a nuclear device, high explosive components. Again, we don't have IAEA inspectors monitoring Iran's explosive production capabilities, and I think Iran could very easily, in a very short period of time, and I believe they already have done, assembled basically 3 to 5 nuclear devices minus the fissile material. Now, I don't know what design they're going to use. Are they going to use a spherical compression? Or use a gun device? I don't know. The easiest one is the gun device. The other one, where you have to make the different lenses, requires a lot of testing. If you want to do a quick boom bomb, a gun device, and they have the uranium to do it. The spherical device generally it can be like a plutonium weapon that requires processing of spent uranium fuel rods. Again, a whole other level of stuff that Iran could do, but it's too complicated for a quick turnaround. My bet is a gun device is going to produce a yield of 15, 20 kilotons, enough to destroy all of Tel Aviv, Haifa, Eilat, central Israel, Beersheba, Dimona. That's it. And if Israel uses a nuclear weapon against Iran, I can pretty much guarantee that Iran will destroy all of Israel. Israel will cease to exist. That's a guarantee. And that's not me just speaking out, thin air. The Iranians have pretty much said that. And again, the Iranians aren't going to make this statement. The Iranians, when they made the decision to attack on October 1st, that decision was made as part and parcel of a strategic understanding of what could happen because of this, up to and including Israel using nuclear weapons in response. Iran has already factored in all of these possibilities, and they have scenarios for each one. The second Israel started talking about the potential of using nuclear weapons, I think things have been triggered inside Iran. I'd be very curious to hear from the IAEA and their report card on potential diversion. I'd like to know when the last time they did a full accounting of Iran's UF6 is 60% enriched uranium hexafluoride. I'd like to know the last time they did that. I'd like to know the last time they inspected the underground cascades that are specifically designed to produce the high enriched uranium. Because if I were the Iranians, I would have already begun the process of making highly enriched uranium. I would have already, just statements of the Israelis alone said, okay, let's do it. And I would have quietly sent out signals to my Persian Gulf neighbors that you don't want to let the United States use bases, and you don't want to have Israel attacking our oil infrastructure, because from a self-preservation standpoint, we have to take out everybody's oil infrastructure. We can't allow ourselves to be isolated that way. For deterrence to work, the world has to understand we will take everything out. Therefore, if we are attacked, we will take everything out, which creates global economic chaos, high prices, the whole works. But we'll see. But I think Iran will be a nuclear power before the year is out. They have no choice. Israel has behaved in a totally irresponsible fashion. They're going to get more and more desperate as they continue to fail across the board. The other thing that has to happen is that the United States and the world now have to stand up and confront Israel on its nuclear weapons program. We can't allow it to exist anymore. It's irresponsible. And I would say at the same time, once we target Israel's nuclear weapons program, we have to go to the Iranians and say, you don't get one either. That's the deal. We will verifiably dismantle this, but we have to come in and make sure you don't have one and nobody else gets one too. And then, we have to begin this process, but we can't allow Israel to have these nuclear weapons anymore. It's a genocidal, insane state full of hatred, and it's desperate. These are people that view the Arabs as subhumans. They speak of Amalek, the need to eradicate these threats, and the fact that they even consider using nuclear weapons preemptively against Iran makes them, it disqualifies them as responsible nation state.
You talk about the talks and the way that we can avoid a nuclear race in the Middle East. Do you think that was Israel successful in sabotaging what the talks between Washington and Iran by these assassinations, the assassination in Iran and in Beirut?
I think the Iranians have always held the door open for diplomatic relations with the United States. Even Raisi was willing to sit down and talk. I don't think, but the Iranians have long ago lost any notion that the United States is a serious negotiator. That they just don't believe us anymore. Dating all the way back to the JCPOA, which they signed and they implemented in good faith, but they knew from the beginning the United States would never ever follow through. The sunset clauses were a suicide pill for the United States because the U.S. had said Iran will never be allowed to have these capabilities, and yet the agreement allowed Iran to have capabilities America said they'll never be allowed to have. So you knew at some point in time, if you're Iranian, that the United States would intervene and pull out. Barack Obama forecast that. He said, when the time comes for the sunset clauses to expire, we will reevaluate this. I'm like, what is there to reevaluate? You made an agreement. Why do you have to reevaluate it if you never intended to, unless you never intended to, go forward? And that's the truth. The United States never did. So, how do you sabotage something that the other side understands will never manifest itself? Iran never expected the United States to do anything. I will say in the short term, it appears that the Iranian president, the new Iranian president, was told by the United States that if they hold back on retaliating against Israel's assassination of a senior Hamas official in Tehran, that the United States would be able to get a ceasefire arranged, and that get the conflict to drive down. That would be the price Iran would pay by not retaliating to Israel. Peace would break out. And he went back to a skeptical leadership in Iran and said, this is the deal, I'd like to pursue it. And they went with it. He actually came to the General Assembly debate in New York and was talking about sitting down, negotiating, and doing things. And then Israel assassinated Hassan Nasrallah. After Hassan Nasrallah agreed to the ceasefire that the United States said they were trying to broker, after Netanyahu was briefed on Hassan Nasrallah's agreement, he still ordered the assassination. And at that point in time, the Iranians understood that the United States could never again be trusted, and they made the decision to retaliate. But the United States did make certain things, promised certain things to Iran if it wouldn't attack. The United States failed to deliver. It turns out the United States lied the entire time. We had no expectation to believe Israel would ever accept this ceasefire. We knew about the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. We did nothing to stop it. I mean, we're literally the worst nation on the planet.
Do you think that with this assassination of Nasrallah and his commanders, are they still in a disarray, or they're just finding their strategy to against Israel?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's not easy to lose your senior leadership, but Hezbollah is a resistance organization. Nasrallah has said for years that he is a living martyr, that he expects to die. He knows that Israel's been targeting him. Israel has targeted him in the past. As an organization, Hezbollah has, anticipated this. They have a chain of command, and you saw how they reacted. They replaced him. That guy was killed. They replaced him. That guy was killed. So they went to a shared leadership position where they're not advertising who the shared leadership is. Meanwhile, the cellular structure of Hezbollah is such that, the different entities in Hezbollah still operate. They still coordinate. They still function. You see, they haven't lost cohesion in their defense of southern Lebanon. They still are able to launch rocket attacks against Israel. I mean, has Israel, inflicted harm? Of course they have. I mean, you have to give hats off to the Israeli intelligence for being able to do this targeting. But Hezbollah has been preparing for this war for, since 2006, for 18 years. And I don't think anything Israel's done changes 18 years of preparation in an organizational structure that's designed to operate independent of central planning and leadership.
Scott, when you look at the situation in Gaza right now, after 12 months, a year in this conflict, how do you find the situation in Gaza? Because at the same time, Israel is fighting Hezbollah, they're attacking Gaza as well. And it seems that with this conflict with Iran, together with Hezbollah, everybody's just forgetting about Gaza and what's going on right now in Gaza. What's your assessment of the Israeli strategy in Gaza? Are they trying to attack at the same time Hezbollah and Gazans, or they're focused on Hezbollah right now?
Well, no, clearly they're doing both. Hamas hasn't gone away. Hamas continues to resist. The Israelis are continuing operations. It appears Israel is focused on securing the Philadelphia corridor, which connects Gaza to Egypt. And then they've dug a corridor in the middle of, splitting Gaza in half, a northern half and a southern half. And this appears to be Israel's long-term strategy, to focus on that. But Hamas hasn't gone away. The tunnels are still there. Some people estimate that 80% of the original tunnels are in place. Hamas has apparently had success recruiting amongst the population of Gaza to replace fighters that have been lost. The resistance has the ability to resupply, and it's there. It hasn't been defeated. Hezbollah always hesitated to, the reason why they didn't jump to escalation is, one, they wanted to protect the people of Lebanon from what's happening now, collective punishment and total violation of international law, slaughtering thousands of innocent Lebanese who have nothing to do with Hezbollah. But that's how Israel operates. But Hezbollah wanted to avoid this kind of escalation, do a managed escalation at the front. It's clear that Israel has opted for, increasing the scope and scale of its conflict with Hezbollah. And what's going to happen is that fewer people are going to be talking about what's going on in Gaza. This has always been something that Hezbollah and Iran wanted to avoid. If Israel and Iran get involved in the fight, people stop talking about what's going on in Lebanon. Right now we're speaking of the thousands of people who are dying in Lebanon and somehow forgetting the 40 to 180,000 Palestinians that died in Gaza. And if we get into see a broader conflict between Israel and Iran, we'll stop talking about Lebanon. We'll be talking about this and energy security and the impact on, global energy markets. This is always the risk of escalation, is that you lose sight of the original fight, which was to create a Palestine. But then what happens is the potential of Palestine becoming, because if you can say, well, we can reverse engineer all of this back down to a solution in Gaza, suddenly you have more political imperative to have a solution in Gaza. So it's a gamble, because once you get into global energy markets and strategic conflict between Israel and Iran, there's no guarantee you're going to be able to reverse engineer that back to Gaza and people just forget about Gaza. But if the cure is resolving the Palestine issue, and then Iran says, well, then we no longer need to be in a conflict. Hezbollah says we no longer need to be in a conflict, and we can bottle it up. Maybe that's what's needed, because right now what's happening isn't working on either front. You have the world giving lip service to the need for the creation of a Palestinian state, but you have nothing really practical taking place. And you can't, as long as Benjamin Netanyahu is the prime minister.
Scott, there is a division between analysts, political and military analysts, when it comes to the case of Israel. In your opinion, I talked with Michael Hodson, Gilbert Doctorow, and Larry Johnson. They have different ideas, and Ambassador Chas Freeman, together with Larry Johnson, they're thinking that the United States Israeli lobby is in charge of what's going on in the Middle East. And on the other hand, we have Michael Hudson and Gilbert. They're talking about that the United States is in charge of what's going on in the Middle East. In your assessment, is the military industrial complex, is the Israeli lobby in the United States, is Israeli government in charge of what's going on? Who's running the show, in your opinion?
Well, I don't think it's black and white. I think there's, I can say this. I don't know, the background of all these people, what their, scope and scale of their experiences are. I know that, Gilbert Doctorow was a successful businessman in Russia, and that's it. and now he's, talking about things. I don't know what his background is. I know that when I resigned from my position as a UN weapons inspector in 1998, that I was courted by the Israeli lobby in a major way. I was brought into the inside of AIPAC, to the Washington Near East Institute, and saw their interaction, watched as they lobbied senators. I watched how Trent Lott, who at the time was the Senate Majority Leader, basically did whatever it took to appease the Israeli lobby. I saw how AIPAC insinuated itself into every aspect of the mass media market. I saw how they fundraised. I saw how they did everything they do. Because for a moment there, I guess they thought that I would play their game. And then when they realized I wouldn't play the game, all the doors slammed shut. But for a brief while, I saw the reality of the pro-Israeli lobby and the influence that they have everywhere. They're everywhere. They control everything. But at the same time, within the United States, within the establishment, there are elements that are just vehemently anti-Israel. Where the lobby hasn't broken into, and these are deeply entrenched things, and that's when you get into energy security. As strong as the Israeli lobby is, they're not as strong as ExxonMobil, Standard. When we're talking hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars of economic potential with a global scale, the Israeli lobby doesn't control them. The Israeli lobby doesn't control the pharmaceutical industry. The Israeli lobby doesn't control a whole bunch of things in the United States. They have a very limited, span of control and influence on things that pertains particularly to Israel. The Israeli lobby does not control the Pentagon. I'll just make that absolutely clear. The Israeli lobby doesn't control the Pentagon. They may have the ability to influence the Pentagon. They've sucked parasites here, there, and everywhere. They don't control the Pentagon. And they don't control the military-industrial complex. As much, I can tell you that when you take a look at the amount of money we send to Israel, it pales in comparison with the other contracts that we put around the world. I mean, what it was, $3.8 billion a year is our military sales to Israel. We conclude contracts bigger than that with other people, on a monthly basis. So the idea that the military-industrial complex is beholden to Israel is absurd. The Israelis have a lot of influence, but there's a lot of independent. The big thing is on policy that impacts Israel. Where a specific policy impacts Israel, the lobby has a tremendous amount of influence. But I will tell you right now that we did not invade Iraq because of Israel. I mean, Israel played a role in it, a supporting role. But I remind people that up until 1998, the Israelis were actually working with the United Nations to achieve the disarmament of Iraq in opposition to the American policy of regime change. You see, the Israelis had a regime change policy in place that was brought to fruition right after the Gulf War ended. When Yuri Sergey, the commander of military intelligence, made a decision that they need to kill Saddam Hussein. And from 1991 to 1993, the Israelis bent over backwards to kill him. They put in special forces teams. They reconned the area. They got right up to Aujah and Tikrit and picked the assassination spot. They knew how they're going to fly in, where their guys were going to be. They picked the event. It was the death of Saddam's uncle. There was going to be a funeral. The funeral procession was going to come down by Aujah, and the assassination teams were going to take him out with these special designed rockets. Sayat Matkel guys working with Golani, working with the guys that are going to flee to the desert, get on helicopters and go home. They did rehearsals, live rehearsals, where they put teams on the ground to do it. I know, I met the guys that did it, and they were going to kill this guy, kill Saddam. And then in their final dry rehearsal, live fire, it wasn't supposed to be live fire. It was supposed to be just a rehearsal with all the political people there. They had a live fire accident. They fired a rocket towards the car that was carrying the simulated Saddam, and it was a real thing. Bam, they killed him, killed a bunch of the commandos, and that was the end of the mission. Then people leaked it to the press, and once you leaked it to the press, that was it. Can't do it again. And at that point in time, the Israelis made the decision that they have to find another way to deal with the problem of Saddam. And that's when, through a variety of means, including me leading, participating, I can't say I led it. I was one of three people when it was my idea. Two other UN officials came with me to meet with Yuri Sergey and other senior Israelis to talk about why don't they try the disarmament route. And we convinced the Israelis that disarmament was the best way to go forward. And from 1994 to 1998, I traveled to Israel all the time, met with these guys. I met with the guy that was supposed to be Saddam, the guy who thought like Saddam. And by the end, what the Israeli said is that Saddam's a rational actor, not suicidal, and that he can be contained through a combination of, if we disarm him and lift the sanctions, then enough economic incentives can be put to place on Saddam to prevent him from doing other things. That was the Israeli position in 1998. In 3 years after I left, they changed and they flipped and they said, oh, they have weapons of mass destruction, even though they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. But we didn't go to real war because Israel said they had weapons of mass destruction. During the entire decade of the 90s, when I was working with the Israelis to disarm Iraq, the United States was working to get rid of Saddam Hussein because he was a political problem for the United States. We went to war in Iraq not for Israel. We went to war in Iraq for oil and regional dominance. Now, people say, well, that's part of the project for New American Century and all this stuff. Yes, that's peripheral. But America goes to war for America. That's what people need to understand. So I take vehement disagreement with businessmen turned academics turned geopolitical analysis who think they know how American military strategy works. They don't. You know who does? Chas Freeman, Larry Johnson. Those are the guys. I'll trust their judgments more than I'll trust Dr. Owen. Was like Hudson. Again, I have nothing against them. I respect their judgment. I'll read them with great interest. But I'm just saying that my personal experience, having fought a war for Israel, just never forget what the 1991 Gulf War. The war that I fought was an anti-missile campaign, which was all about preventing missiles from being fired into Israel. And so, that was literally what we were doing on the ground in Western Iraq was for the direct benefit to keep Israel out of the war. So I've been in a war on behalf of Israel. But I can also tell you that what happened in the 1990s wasn't because of Israel. It was because of what the United States wanted. That Israel is actually at one period of time, a very critical period of time, on the other side trying to achieve a different result, which implies that the Pentagon, State Department policymakers aren't working necessarily in concert with the Israelis and the pro-Israeli lobby.
Is Russia transferring more weapons to Syria? And I'm talking about
Syria or Iran?
Syria.
I don't know. I mean, it appears that
big airplane going to Syria. The same one came to Iran, if you remember. Then we were talking about big weapons coming to Iran?
Again, I don't know. I mean, I've seen the flights. Logic dictates that there's something on that flight. It'd be interesting to see, because we know that the Israelis just recently attacked a warehouse that's right outside of the perimeter of the Russian base in Syria. Many people thought that maybe they attacked the Russian base itself. In fact, it was so close that the Russian air defense actually engaged many of the incoming missiles. So the Israelis are sensitive about this. It'd be interesting to see what happens if Israel deems that the cargo on any of these flights is detrimental to its national security interests. Would they dare attack a Russian cargo plane? It's a dangerous game the Israelis are playing, but we know that Russia has, we say we know, reports are that Russia has approved the sale and may have actually transferred several batteries of S-400 surface-to-air missiles, facilitating the transfer of a number of Su-35 advanced Generation 4 plus fighters to Iran. I don't know what they're doing with Syria. Maybe an upgrade to Syrian air defense, because Israel has just been bombing Syria at will, and it's sort of embarrassing for the Syrians. So maybe Russia is going to upgrade their air defense systems as well. I don't know.